Not giving up. Hey everybody, Luxinda Swirl here. Thank you for joining me on my Paper and Other Obsessions channel. It's good to see you. I'm in a slightly better frame of mind than I was last week. Yay. I want to return to the idea of using transfer foils, but in a less conventional way than they're usually used. If you'll recall, we've done work with these before. Specifically, this was created. I will link to that video below if you haven't seen that. And then I took this idea and I put it on a tumbler on the other channel, which was fun to do. So we're coming back to transfer foils. I have lots of leftover bits and pieces from, for example, this. I tried this already. I wanted to try it off camera just to see if it truly worked. I got this idea from watching Simon Hurley. And if you don't know who he is, he's a leader in the card making, paper crafting community. He has his own brand and mega line of paper crafting products. He's really fun to watch. He's pretty amazing. So I will link his channel down below. If you haven't seen him, please go check him out. His idea was, instead of using black laser toner as the adhesive, you print out a graphic using just black laser toner from a laser printer, and then you put the foil over that and you run those two things together through a laminator to get heat and pressure applied, and that is what turns the toner into an adhesive so that the transfer foils stick to just the places where the toner was. So this is the same principle, but in this case the adhesive is embossing powder. Here's what I did. I took a stamp, specifically this one, and I have lots, lots. So this one is from this set, Fun Christmas Cats. I think these are Tim Holtz. Yes, they are Tim Holtz. And then we used a couple of the bird ones in a different video where I stamped mica powder into a silicone mold and then poured resin on it. So you've seen these before. I will link to that video below if you haven't seen how I did this. And I think I'm going to try one out of this collection to show you this technique here. I have a million leftover resin coasters, so I just grabbed one of those. That's going to be my acrylic block that we stick the stamp to. This is a piece of, I think it's watercolor paper. It's the very thick cardstock that has texture on one side and it's smooth on the other, and I'm going to work with the smooth side like I did here. So in order to get embossing powder onto where we put our stamp impression, we need embossing ink. And I happen to have a bottle of embossing ink from making this tumbler where I showed how you can use embossing powder, in this case metallic embossing powder, to get metallic lines onto an alcohol ink tumbler. If you haven't seen that and you were curious about how I did that, I will link to this video below as well. I don't have an embossing stamp pad, but I've discovered that I can use a makeup sponge. So I am going to put some of this embossing ink onto it's really thick. I was a little surprised by that. I guess it has to be because it doesn't, the idea is it doesn't dry quickly, so you have time to get the embossing powder on it. So I'm going to put a little on there, and then I'm going to rub it all over this guy and try and smooth things out. I don't really want it to be big glops. I want it to be like we used a stamp pad. So I will put some on and then I will rub it around with the sponge so that we get embossing fluid or embossing ink everywhere, but not too much, not gloppy amounts. Hopefully you can see this. You can see where it's wet now. And that's going to stay that way for a little while because, again, this is a very thick, slow-drying ink, which is the idea. So now I'm going to stamp it onto this card. Just put it down there. I will just rub the back to make sure I get all of the detail, or as much as I can anyway, onto the card in embossing ink. Okay. So this is when I grab my clear embossing powder. That I got off Amazon. It's not Tim Holtz Ranger, so it's much less expensive. It's much more reasonably priced. And you pour it on, tip and tap it off. Probably use a fluffy brush to get the extras off. But anyway, I don't know how well that shows up. I should have used a black cardstock, I suppose. So the stamp is on there in embossing powder now. So now I'm going to take an embossing heat gun and I'm going to melt it. Okay, so now you can see that I have embossing powder melted all over where there was embossing ink and the powder stuck. We're going to let this cool. I don't want it to be liquid still. I want it to be basically a solid plastic is what it cools off into. The embossing powder is just very tiny little plastic beads and we've just melted them. So now we have plastic image. Okay, and now once this is cooled off and ready to go, we have our parchment paper packet or folder that we had last time. And I'm going to take a hunk of unused foil from one of the Beatles pieces we did. I'm going to make sure it's over the graphic. Tuck that inside. Now I want to bring over my Scotch brand cheapo laminator from Walmart. And now we're going to feed this fold side in to our laminator. And I'm going to put it through twice just to make sure I get really good pressure on the whole graphic. Put that off to the side, and we're going to let this cool. Should be cool. Let's see what happened. Ooh, that's not good at all. What a disappointment. It worked so well on the other one. I wonder if this is just too old because I've used it before. Let's use a chunk that hasn't been used. I mean, where it's stuck, it's pretty. Not giving up. So this is fresh foil. It hasn't been already run through the laminator before. And we'll send it through a couple more times. Okay, we got a much better print off of that. It's still not perfect. We're missing his eyeball there, or his iris. But it's much better than it was. So I'm guessing this takes a certain amount of trial and error to find out how much ink to put on, how many times to run it through the laminator. When I saw Simon Hurley do this, he had a laminator with different heat settings and I think pressure settings. He had a much fancier one than mine. I have a Missouri stamp based on one of their popular molds. They have a mold, and I have it somewhere, for this beautiful owl. So they made two versions and some extra, I guess, owl-related stuff. Leaves and acorns, and a saying, which is, wish it, dream it, do it, that I probably won't use because if I did what I was wishing and dreaming, I'd probably end up in jail. So, you know, this doesn't really apply to me. I won't be using that saying, but I love the owls. We'll do the owls, or an owl. I don't know if you can see that or not, but you'll see it when I put the embossing powder on. So there's our image so far. All right, so there's what we have now. And I'm going to let it cool and harden because this is melted plastic right now. I have some unused portion of this, so let's try that. Parchment paper folder, put this in it, put the foil over the graphics, but not sticking out the side because you don't want the foil to hit your heating element or anything when it goes through the laminator. Ooh. We could run it through again. There's no reason we don't. Why not? I'll try it again. See if it makes a difference. Yeah, we got better coverage that time. We got more of the owl and more of the leaves. Now, what would I do with this? I would make it a square, and then you could put it on top of a white piece of cardstock and turn it into a greeting card. You could also cut these out and put them on a layered piece of some sort, mixed media piece. All right, folks, I'm going to call it here. If you want to learn a lot more about this and other ways you can use this, I would seriously recommend you check out the Simon Hurley video that I'll link below, where I saw this happen the first time, because he goes on to show other ways that you can use this and other similar but slightly different techniques for the embossing with these foils. Anyway, I hope you've learned something interesting today. Thank you for joining me. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next video.